Hey you! Yeah, you! Welcome to the Malaka podcast. What really happened at the end of The Sopranos? The show's been off the air for what? Almost 10 years. And people are still wondering what happened. Did he die? Did he carry on with the rest of his life? Did he just disappear? Did he eventually become a deli salesman? Who knows? But in my opinion, Tony Soprano died in that last episode. I'm going to explain why. To explain the episode, you got to know a little bit of the history of Sopranos. And The Sopranos originally aired in 1998. But the first pilot was actually made in 1997. It took HBO a whole year to make a second episode. And even if you watch the very first episode, James Gandolfini sounds like James Gandolfini. He just sounds like himself.
He doesn't put on the Jersey accent. He doesn't talk like this.
He just talked like himself. They're still experimenting with a lot of things. That's what you do in a pilot. You have no idea what characters are going to last. You don't know which ones are going to catch on. You're just throwing it out there, see what happens. The first season of The Sopranos, I don't want to say it's a joke, but it's definitely the funniest one out of all of them. I don't think it was meant to be taken as seriously as the other seasons. You got a lot more Italian references. You got Carmela whipping out a gun from the wall with grenades next to it. A lot of people have said this. I kind of agree. The mother and son aspect back and forth, it was really funny at times. At times it was meant to be more serious, but I think, again, they were just playing around with it and just seeing, could we make this work? Now, at the end of the first season, it didn't really catch on that much to the audience. It was more of a cult following after the second season. Once that happened, everybody was hooked. Now, the second season, if I could recommend one season to anybody that's never watched the show before, it's definitely the second season. I think it's very well rounded, very well written, a lot of great characters. Again, I could give away what happens at the end. If you're a Soprano fan, you know what's going to happen. But that made the show very unpredictable. The crazy thing about Sopranos is you fell in love with a lot of these characters. And it's like when you watch a TV show, like for, let's say, 8, 9, 10 seasons, like you don't expect people just to disappear. Or even if they do, it's not till the end of the series. With Sopranos, you never knew. I mean, even all the actors would always say they would pick up the script for that week. They would quickly read it just to see if their character got killed off or disappeared or just wasn't there anymore. A second season is very solid. I would definitely recommend that to anybody who has never seen The Sopranos before. If you just want to watch one season and just get a feel of it, you'll be very happy. Now, the third season was also great. But it got to a point now where just before the third season, everybody knew about the show. It was even featured on Rolling Stone, and people really were hooked. Also, a lot of people didn't like the violence. They felt the violence just got to a point where it just looked bad on Italians, and it just wasn't really well done. Personally, I liked it. Everything you got to take with a grain of salt, or in this case, with a cup of blood. And believe me, there was lots of cups of blood spilled on The Sopranos. But it's just one of those things, you just either gotta love it or you gotta hate it. And when season 4 came, they really dumbed down the violence. Fortunately, season 4 had a lot of other stories that were meant to be written in, but it didn't work out because a lot of the actors had a lot of other things going on. And they even had one episode where they tried to rectify the whole Italian mob and tried to make it more, not so much friendly, but just not to make us look like a bunch of gavones. So, they wrote in a episode about Christopher Columbus. They killed off the violence for the most part. And it's probably the weakest season of all. Not gonna lie, it's probably the worst season out of all of them. Now, season 5, I thought was excellent. Got my boy Steve Buscemi in there. I hope I'm saying that right. Buscemi. I've always said that wrong. I still don't know if it's Charlize Theron or Theron. I don't know. But anyways, excellent season. Another great season I would absolutely recommend. Season 6 was broken up into 2 parts. Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1, again, was excellent. Again, I can't really give anything away because if you've never seen the show, I don't want to give anything away. You just have to sit there and watch it and enjoy the ride. Season 2, if you're a big fan of The Sopranos, I truly believe was the best season out of the series. Every episode was excellent. It had a very strong message in every single episode. And it was just solid. So basically you have The Sopranos broken up into 7 seasons. Some of the breaks between the series were as much as like a year and a half. A lot of the writing didn't always come together as quickly as they thought. I mean, it takes a long time to make some of these episodes. I heard it would take anywhere between 7 to 10 days just to record one episode. That's not including the writing and everything else that comes with it. And to this day, it still has a very big cult following. But a lot of people at the end of the show were very disappointed on how the show ended. But I wasn't. I thought it was great. I remember sitting there watching it with my mom and dad. And I remember when that screen went black, I honestly thought the cable went out. I even heard that HBO had so many calls that night, complaints about people's cables going out. Or at least they thought it did. But it didn't. What really happened was Tony Soprano passed away. Now I'm going to explain why I think this. When you see the scene, as soon as he gets into the restaurant, he looks straight, and then he looks on his right. And then you see him sitting down. He's giving you already an aspect of the paranoia he's got to go through every day of him being a mob boss. So when he sits down in the restaurant, he wants to make sure he sees everything. Everybody coming in, sees the left, sees right, sees the front door straight on. He's able to access everything. I'll be honest with you, until I saw this episode, I never really understood what kind of paranoid thoughts he must be thinking. And he's thinking about this all the time. Imagine if you're in charge of a business where at any moment it could end. Every day when he would wake up, he'd walk down the driveway, get the newspaper. He always wanted to be in control. I mean, there was a part of him that was really just fearless. But at the same time, he wanted to be always in control. very aware of what's going around, and always wanting to be able to access everything. So once he's sitting at the restaurant, he looks in the music booth, or the little booth that's in each table there, just going through the songs. And he plays Don't Stop Believing from Journey. Now, obviously, you got to think to yourself, the group's name is Journey. So he's on his little journey. The name of the song is called Don't Stop Believing. Some things are just pretty obvious. So it kind of sets the tone for the whole scene. Even when you look around in the scene, you see a couple going out. You see, looks like some kind of scout troop there. You see people at the counter looking at the food. It gives you a very good sense of safety when you're there. You know, very family-orientated restaurant. And then Carmela, his wife, comes in. She sits down, and they just start talking. Carmela's concerned about Carlo. Now, Carlo, his son got picked up for dealing ecstasy. Now, I'm assuming you're probably going to look at least a minimum of 10, 15, maybe even 20 years if you're caught dealing. If he had priors, forget it. He's screwed. Now, obviously, he's going to testify against Tony Soprano, and Tony knows that. He even says to Carmela, it's Carlo, he's going to testify. So already, Tony's just trying to put this out of his head. You know, he's just trying to focus on his family. Just wants to enjoy the night. Enjoy every moment he can with his family. Then at one point, Carmela says, Meadow will be here soon. She's just out getting birth control. And then you see Tony's face. Now, every father wants to hear that their daughter is, getting birth control, But I think it symbolizes more that she's more grown up and she's taking responsibility for her actions. If you look all the way back in season 1, there's a great episode called College. And again, I won't give a lot of it away if you've never seen it, but it basically just shows how strong of a bond Tony and Meadow had. And it always kind of continued throughout the series. Even in the last episode, there's a great moment where it's just her and Tony just talking over dinner. He would always say, we used to do this all the time. But like every other parent, you got to accept your kid is growing up and just trust that they're doing everything great with their lives and they know what's best. Tony was always concerned about Meadow and what career she would take. She decided to go into law, and Tony always wanted her to be a doctor. But like many kids, they always go their own way. You don't always know where they're gonna go, and again, you just hope that they know what's best for themselves and they're happy. And Tony was always a little disappointed in that, but he always cared. Then Anthony comes into the scene. Now, when Anthony comes in the scene, he comes in the scene with another guy. Now, he doesn't know who the other guy is. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've been to many Italian weddings. That guy looks like every other guy that's shown up at a wedding. But, that guy, he just ends up sitting on the side of the bar. And Anthony sits down. Tony's very happy to see him. he mentioned to Anthony that he just ordered some onion rings for the whole table. He smells the onion rings. And then he grabs Anthony's arm. Best in the city. The way he grabs his arm is very loving and very caring. You could see that. When you're the only son in an Italian family, it's very important. It's a very important position. It means you're the man of the house in case the father is never there. I think he always felt that Anthony wasn't as tough as him. He wasn't very bright, but it's one of those things where it just comes with age. Maybe he didn't have to grow up as fast as him, and he was given a lot more things earlier on in his life, and I just don't think he wanted him to end up like Fredo Corleone. And he always wanted something better, him and Carmela. They got him an internship on a movie set, and they're explaining to him, it starts off very slow. You're just answering calls, getting people coffee, It takes time, and just enjoy it. Even threw like a little piece of paper at him, a little piece of napkin, and goes, just buck up. And he goes, yeah, you're right. Just focus on the good times. And Tony goes, don't be sarcastic. And then Anthony goes, isn't that what you said one time? Just focus on the good times? Anthony goes, I did? And then Anthony Jr. goes, yeah, you did. Huh. I guess that makes sense. Now, that was referring to a scene at the end of season 1. So it really shows how much Tony's just forgotten, and maybe he's gone off course in his life. But it's good to see that his family, especially his son, still remembers those little moments. Now, those of you that know me, okay, I'm not going to make the obvious joke about when Meadow comes up to the restaurant. She has a problem parallel parking, okay? There's some great jokes there. I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to keep it classy, I don't want it to reflect bad on me. So, I've tried the parallel park too. It's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes. I remember one time, actually, I was on a date with a woman, an Italian woman, and ironically, we were in Little Italy, and I just told her park on one of these side streets, and it literally took her 20 minutes to park. I literally at one point had to get out of the car. I had to kind of guide her how to do it. There was like this old Italian family on this one veranda. They were talking to me like, oh, what's going on with this woman? She doesn't know how to park. I'm like, give her time. Don't ruin my chances. And, so again, I'm not going to touch that. Not going to touch it. When Meadow comes in, opens the door, you hear the bell, he looks up, don't stop. Nine-second pause. I timed it. I thought to myself, okay, 9 seconds. Why have it's about 9 seconds? Why out of as long as they could have? They could have let it pause for like a couple seconds, 20 seconds. Why 9 seconds? Is this a way of telling the viewer that Tony's 9 lives are up and that's it? Even just before Meadow came in, the guy at the bar walked into the bathroom, and Tony kind of glanced at him. Didn't think much of it. Just again, just wanted to make sure what's around him, and making sure that everything is safe. Now, when I first saw that, I thought to myself, is this not reminiscent to The Godfather? He's going in the bathroom, is the gun behind the toilet? I mean, do they have one of those old toilets from 1950 something with the chain pull handle? I like, what's going on here? So I truly believe that the people that came into the restaurant, Tony's family, they came in from least important to important. Now, that's not to say that Carmela is not important to him. I truly believe that she is. But if there's a top three, starting at number 3, it's Carmela, then Anthony, and then Meadow. There's a great scene in Sopranos where Tony just came home drunk, and he was just drinking at the table, in the dining room table, just by himself. He was in the dark. Meadow came home late, and she turned on the light and saw him just drinking there. And they were just talking, and there wasn't really that much tension there, but I'm sure no one wants to, no daughter wants to come home and see her dad get drunk, by himself and in the dark. But there was a point where she was looking at him and just said, oh, I think you should just go to bed. And then Tony said, I tell people you're like your mother, but you're all me. I think, and that's why the bond was so great between them, because in many ways they were very much alike. And in the end, I think that person, Meadow Soprano, was the most important thing to Tony in his life. Not to say that Anthony and Carmela were not important, but he knew at a very young age that Meadow was all him. It's almost like in The Godfather, where you see Godfather Part 2. I mean, you can see them all as kids. You can see, Sonny acting all tough and Fredo kind of being shy, and he always held Michael in his arms, and he always showed him everything, just helping him sample food, and he just knew. I mean, I always believe that every parent knows what bond they'll have best with one child, and he knew that. And it's almost like right before Tony died, it's almost like God was giving him a gift, saying, you know what, you fucked up way too many times for you not to be dead right now. You cheated death, you've done some horrible things, but I'm going to give you one last gift. I'm going to show you what your legacy is. And when he looked up, he saw her. I believe the guy came out of the bathroom, shot him in the head, and that's it. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, who would kill Tony Soprano? Not the actual guy here, but who would actually send the hit? Well, after Phil Leotardo is no longer part of the picture, that only really leaves, from the other side, from the New York side, Butch. And I believe that this guy wanted Tony dead ever since season 5. There was a point where Phil Leotardo was in the hospital and Butch was right outside the door. He's the guy that definitely cared most about him. And he even looked at Tony when he visited him in the hospital. He says, you shouldn't be here. And then after, him and Phil talked, he tried to just walk around Butch. And he went left, he went right. And then even Butch kind of made a snark remark. He goes, we got to stop meeting like this. And as Tony was walking away, Butch was looking at him. I knew ever since that moment, that dude could not be trusted. And even in that last episode where he gave the okay to kill Phil, Even Tony wanted to know where he was. Butch says, I can't go there. But you do what you got to do. Even the scene before that, when he was talking to Phil on the phone, like he was just looking for him, and he seemed very frustrated on the phone with him. Like he's the one, still out there in the cold doing all this. And I think that was pretty much the last straw. And I think Butch probably thought to himself, you know what? This is the best time to take him out right now. Because even when they were trying to get him the episode before, they knew exactly where everybody was. They knew Bobby was going to go out buying trains. They knew Sil was at the strip club. They figured Tony was going to be there too. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, I guess. But, it was just pretty obvious. And I think Tony just let his guard down. I think it got to a point with Tony where he didn't care. Maybe on some level he knew that it's done. I mean, worst case scenario, if Carlo did snitch on him, he's definitely going to be indicted. They're going to have a lot on him. It's going to be, the final piece of the puzzle that they need to, bring him to court and present this case. He's pretty much done for. And he probably thought to himself, you know what? Let me get one last meal with my family. They must have known that he's been there tons of times. Obviously he makes the remark about like the onion rings being the best in the city. How would he know that unless he hasn't been there a bunch of times? He knew it was coming. Maybe he didn't know exactly that moment or in that exact place it was going to happen. But he knew eventually it was going to happen. He dodged way too many bullets, and this one he just couldn't avoid. Even the first episode in that season 6, part 2, him and Bobby are just chilling out in the boat. Bobby says, you probably won't even hear when it happens. Then the next episode, Silvio catches some backfire when the other guy gets shot. And then later on he's explaining it. I didn't even hear it till after it happened. And it's funny how that happened too. Like it's in the first episode, second episode, and then you kind of just forget about it for a while. You're like, whatever. He's gonna be untouched, whatever. It's fine. And then it happens right at the end of the last episode. In season 3, I remember Uncle June at one point said to Tony, "These things come in threes." Now maybe I'm really overanalyzing this, but was that a message for what's going to happen in the future? Who knows? The Sopranos started off as such a great show, and it ended very strong as well. I think a lot of people were just expecting this big shootout scene, and we kind of got that the episode before. Even when the episode first starts, the very last episode, it starts with Tony in bed. And it honestly does look like he's almost dead in a casket already. They got the organs playing in the background. A lot of people have mentioned that aspect of it, and yeah, I agree. It's almost like telling you, look, he's eventually going to die. Even the whole episode, he's just trying to make rights out of his wrongs by talking to his sister, his uncle, friends of his. It's almost like he knows, like he's got 24 hours to live and that's it. Worst case scenario, everything is taken care of. Family was always a big importance for the show, from Tony Soprano's perspective. Everything revolved around family. And that was by far the most important thing in his life. As long as everything else was taken care of, he didn't care if he lived or died. He knew that eventually everything that he's done in his life would come back and he would suffer for it. When life is done, it's darkness. It's over. It's like the end of a movie when you see the credits. You got the text, and what do you got? The black, dark background. And that's all that's left. That's all Tony Soprano had to endure. He had to deal with his darkness. I remember the very first scene of the very first episode of The Sopranos. It shows Tony sitting by himself in the waiting room to see Dr. Melfi. And he looks at a statue of a woman naked, and he's just thinking to himself. I always wonder what he was thinking. Maybe right in the beginning of the series, it was telling you that Tony Soprano's biggest fear is him being vulnerable, him being completely exposed for the world to see, and people looking at him like he's weak. When you're a man that's in control, you always have to keep control. And it's a strain. It's a huge strain on the human body. The last thing you want to be remembered for, if you're a man in that position, is being exposed and being touchable to anything. And eventually seeing darkness. And that's what really happened at the end of The Sopranos.